parents, second years and fifth years tomorrow. The link will be sent tomorrow. So if you've not done anything, or if a parent hasn't been able to do the meeting, or in the fifth meeting perhaps, you can certainly look at the link and be able to check out what's important. Having a second year information meeting for parents and guardians. We've had this a number of years now, and this can be very useful and work exercise. For our first years, we have information where we discuss the transition from primary school to secondary school. For our third years, we have an information meeting which is the implications of advice as you move up into senior cycle. 6 years, we have information with the structure and importance of the year and happens after secondary school. So as a parent, you might ask, is it necessary to have an information meeting for the second years? You might feel your son or daughter has settled well in the first year and junior cert is not next year. However, as a school, between second year and the attitude work ethic of the student is crucial, not only to their academic, but also to their social development. This is a year where students can develop good habits and bad habits towards the school and the study. And the purpose of this meeting is to try and steer the students towards good habits. To enjoy school and study experience possible.
A laptop over, please.
Into that good habit, like good routine. What they do this year will have a positive influence on how they achieve next year. So for parents, possibly have apologies. Some parents in the chat function seem to sound quite poor. I hope that we can solve that issue there now. Suppose looking at second year and way important students get into that good routine they were having the meeting tonight. Not saying that second years will have to study the entire year, but what I was saying is developing these good habits should form part of the routine in the evening and the weekend. It is important for parents and guardians to acknowledge the role in the student's efforts. Parent and guardian can help the student in a regular routine of doing homework and study by, firstly, checking the sorry, I'm seeing messages coming through here. Is the sound improved any there at all? Might just Miss McSorley, have you there? Let's just see the sound improved.
I'm Darren or Mr. Bishop, the sound is very poor. The quality you can't really make out.
Okay, apologies on that, folks. Just 1 second. Just bear with 1 second. Sound just doesn't. Is that any better, Miss McSorley, at all?
Yeah, that's better. That's clearer.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Apologies for that, folks. I'll flick back a little bit as opposed to where I was, in case you might have missed out on something. So basically, we're just talking about how important it is to steer second years toward good habits to enjoy the school and the experience, and important for parents and guardians to acknowledge the role in the student's efforts. And the parent or guardian can help students in regular routine through homework, study, checking journals on a basis, see if homework is being recorded regularly. Talk to the recorder regularly at school, progress in various subject areas, where possible. It just depends on the circumstances at home. If you can try to have study environment and conditions that are available to the student, free from access to their mobile phones and social media. I know that Ms. McSorley in a few moments' time will speak a little bit more about study and how important it was in terms of making that study experience a worthwhile one. If you do have any concerns in relation to anything that I've spoken about, please feel free to contact the school, email smp@onss.ie, or you can give the school a call at any stage, and we can certainly get back to you as soon as possible. I can still see messages cropping up there, Ms. McSorley. Has the sound improved at all?
No, it's dropped out again, Mr. Bishop. We can't really make you out.
Look at maybe perhaps. So, Ms. McSorley, if you wouldn't mind maybe trying your presentation, I'll try my the sound on my end. Maybe finish off with my bit if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Lovely. I'll share your screen now.
I'm just going to go ahead, Mr. Bishop, and share my screen, if that's okay. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully the sound is okay and you can hear me okay. Sometimes just connections just fail, unfortunately. My name is hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Mr. Bishop, can you let me know if everyone can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly. Apologies about this, folks.
No, you're okay. And hopefully everyone can see that screen. Mr. Bishop, can everyone see the screen?
There's nothing just up yet. I can share if that suits.
Yeah, let me just go back in. I start sharing now. So hopefully that's everybody can see that now. Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Miss McSorley and I'm one of the guidance counsellors here in Our Ladies, and I'm going to go through in detail this evening study skills and the importance of establishing good study skills in second year. The purpose of this presentation is really to talk a little bit about the importance of second year and how second year is a critical year in terms of shaping the future trajectory of students and their performance. Research was conducted by the ESRI, and they found that it was really, really important for students to establish and become engaged in terms of second year. And it was really key that they understood what it was meant by study. So that's why a great focus is put on study and the acquisition of study skills. A lot of questions that we would commonly be asked by parents would be, how much study should my child do? How can I get them motivated? What should I do at exam time? And what can I do to help as a parent? And those would be very common questions that all parents would say to us in terms of study. So hopefully by the end of this evening, we'll address some of those and you'll get a sense about what you can do as a parent in terms of supporting your child and study. So one of the reasons why it's so important that the benefits of having a positive mindset towards study would be the fact that the reduction in stress associated with schools and exams. So it's really important that when you have a good sense of study and your capacity and your ability to study, that it actually alleviates stress that the young person would have around exams. It also increases happiness levels in terms of positivity and their sense of achievement and what they have the potential to achieve. Increased personal confidence, more focused students, better results, and a greater sense of control and mastery. So instead of them sort of drifting along, this gives them a real sense that I have the capacity to study and retrieve information and produce that information, that knowledge on a given day. So that's why we put a huge emphasis on the acquisition of study skills. One of the things that was found when students were asked how they study maths, the general response was that when they were doing maths, that they would have practiced the formula and the problem over and over. And they find this was a great way to master that particular maths formula. And it was found that they, just reading it wasn't enough. They actually had sort of practical application of the formula was needed. And unfortunately, that strategy isn't used in other subjects, but it's found that actually if that strategy was applied to other subjects, that it would help in terms of being able to understand. So the argument here is that it's necessary for all subjects, and reading alone does not work. So it's important that, you know, you might see your son or daughter reading over and over, and it's just not going in, they're just not being able to recall the information. That's when you need to really say, look, you need to sort of use different, or, you know, a variation of study skills to try and absorb all of this knowledge and information that's been given to you in school. So what we're going to look at are the four main ways that students can learn. And I know most people are familiar with this terminology, you know, and there's lots of little sort of quizzes that you can do online to identify what type of learner you are. And it's considered that there are four main ways. You know, you're either a visual learner, and that's where you have to see something in order to understand it. You're an auditory learner, reading and writing, or you have to, you know, read it or write it out multiple times in order to be able to process it, or you're a kinesthetic learner. Most people don't solely fall into one category. Most people are a blend of maybe two or three of those. And that's why it's important to employ lots of different study skills when you're trying to revise for upcoming examinations. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the specifics, the nuts and bolts of the best study techniques that research has found that really works when it comes to students. And as Mr. Bishop said, this presentation will be available, so you will have the opportunity to sort of go back and look at these techniques and maybe support your son and daughter when they come to applying them. It's really important that we sort of understand the different methods, because these methods are used by college students, they're used by Leaving Cert students, and they're also, we see them starting to use these. They might not have the specific name for them, but they start using these methods in the junior cycle as well. So the first one I want to talk about is the SQ3R method. And this method is where reading comprehension technique, and it helps students identify important facts and retain the information within their textbooks. So it's believed that if a student surveys information, so instead of reading the entire book, they skim read the first chapter, they take notes, they use headings, subheadings, images, etc. Then they question, so they formulate questions around the content of the chapter. Okay, so what is this chapter about? What are the key points within this chapter? They begin reading the full chapter and look for answers to the questions they formulated. So they're anticipating what they hope to know before they read the chapter. Then they recite, after reading a section, they summarize in their own words what they've just read. And by putting it into their own words, that will help with the recall of the information. They review. So once you've finished the chapter, it's important to review the material to fully understand it. And then they quiz themselves as a means of testing themselves on the given chapter, or, you know, the piece of information that they have to recall. This is a technique that they use sometimes, but actually don't realize that they're using it. And by having an understanding of the process, that can actually sort of strengthen their confidence in the fact that I am actively revising. So it's important that they can name the methods that they use to revise as well, so they feel empowered. The next method I'm just going to talk about is the retrieval practice. And we've all you know, sat exams over the course of the years, and retrieving information that has been taught to us, that we've revised, is probably one of the, you know, the greatest techniques that we have to acquire. So retrieval practice is based on the concept of remembering at a later time. So you may have covered a topic in second year, but that topic, you may touch it on it, you know, again briefly in third year. And how are you going to retrieve all of that in-depth knowledge? So recalling an answer to a question improves learning more than looking for an answer in a textbook. So this method basically revolves around, you're more likely to remember the information later on. So you are, in some ways, you can implement the retrieval process into your study routine. So we encourage students to utilize practice tests, use the practice tests, use the questions to test themselves without looking at books or notes. So not to become overly reliant on the books or the notes, to actually just test themselves and seeing what they can retrieve, and sort of forcing the brain to try and recall the information that has been taught. So sometimes doing that will actually, it's a great skill to be able to say, right, no, I have to try and remember this, and not always consulting notes and textbooks. Making up their own questions, being their own teacher, creating questions you think might, occur on a test. That's a really good way, again, of aiding the retrieval process. Using flashcards, and I'll talk about that later as well. That's a very popular method amongst a lot of students. So using flashcards to try and retrieve, and you might just have one stimulus word, and hopefully that will bring back all of the information that you have associated with that particular word. So that's a method that's used as well by many students. And again, we encourage them to sort of use the terminology to sort of label their study techniques, so they understand, yeah, I am actively retrieving the information by sitting a practice test. And it's really important that they do that. Spaced practice, it's also known as distributed practice. And this encourages students to study over a longer period of time instead of cramming the night before. And I think we've all experienced cramming, where we've just sat down the night before. And some students, believe it or not, actually are quite reliant on cramming. Not because they've left it last minute, but because they feel that the information that they read the night before is the freshest in their memory. And they're very sort of, they cram and cram and cram the night before, because they think the more I, read the night before, the more likely the fresher it is in my mind, and the more likely I am to be able to produce it the next day. But a spaced practice or distributed practice allows them to understand that you can actually space out your revision and your brain will not forget the information, okay? So in order to try this technique, you, on day one, learn material in class. Day two, you revisit and review. Day three, you revisit and review. And after 1 week, you revisit and review. And after 2 weeks, revisit and review. So it does take a lot of discipline, and it does take a lot of hard work, but constantly revisiting a topic in the time after you've learned it is considered to be a really good way of cementing that information in your sort of knowledge bank, and making sure that you will always be able to recollect that information. It is important to start planning early and ensuring that you're implementing these strategies quite early on in second year. So it's really important that you don't say, well, this is something for later down the line that I worry about in third year in the junior cycle. As mentioned in that first slide, it's really important that they establish a really good study routine early on in second year. And the fourth method is similar to the SQ3R. It's called the PQ4R. And this method is an acronym for preview, question, read, reflect, recite, and review. And this method, again, is about previewing information, skimming material initially, not actually reading the chapter in detail, just skimming it, anticipating what's going to come up in the chapter, asking yourself what's going to come up, what should I be expected to know after this particular chapter or topic, reading it really carefully, one section at a time, reflecting on whether or not you're able to answer all of those questions you initially sort of set out for yourself, being able to recite in your own words, not verbatim the information you just read, but in your own words, being able to recite what you just read, and then reviewing it and going back in time, maybe sort of in a day, 2 days, 1 week. So you're blending it together with the spaced practice method to try and make sure that you're able to produce that information in an exam. The next method that I'm just going to touch on, and again, this presentation will be available afterwards so you can really sort of look at it yourselves, is the Feynman technique. And this is a technique, it's a very efficient method of learning a concept quickly by explaining it in plain and simple terms. So often you'll hear, your son or daughter coming home and saying, the teacher wants me to explain this to you. And really what they're trying to do is they're trying to get you then to explain to someone who has maybe a layman's understanding of the topic what this is about. And by explaining to someone else a concept that's quite abstract, there's huge learning in that, and it's actually called the Feynman technique. Now, this technique is basically about writing the subject or concept you're studying on a sheet of paper, then explaining it in your own words if you were teaching someone else. And again, in terms of Bloom's taxonomy, this is considered to be the highest method of learning. This is where the really abstract, higher level thinking is taking place when you're actually teaching it to someone else. So encourage them to tell you what they're studying and get them to explain to you, you know, I want to get my head around that topic. I want to get my head around that. Can you explain it to me? And what you're actually doing is you're encouraging them to employ the Feynman technique. And by doing that, you're really getting them to engage that higher order thinking. And it's a great way of them understanding what concept or topic they've maybe covered in class. The sixth, Leitner system is a learning technique as well. And again, I mentioned earlier about flashcards, and you see lots of flashcards maybe in the room, and they're writing out notes and they're color coding notes. And it's a great way of trying to, you know, condense all of that information that they're expected to know. And this technique is basically, if you keep your cards in several different boxes to track when you need to study each set. So in box 1 is things that you'll go over every single day. So maybe it's a very basic or common formula that they need to know. Box 2 is things that they maybe need to just go over every 2 days, just that repetition of learning. Maybe box 3 is every 4 days, and box 4 is every 9 days, and then box 5 is every 14 days. And what they can do is they can move their cards along the boxes as well. So they're constantly employing that technique as well of going back and retrieving information that they have previously studied. So sometimes a student will think, well, once I've covered a topic, I know it, I understand it. We did a test in class, I passed, and they move on to the next topic. They constantly have to go back and revisit and relearn all of that information. So it's an ongoing process. You know, it's not a finished product. So study is something that's ongoing, and it's really important that they get into that sort of idea that this isn't something that is fixed, that once you revise something once, that's it, constantly going back and revisiting it. So color-coded notes, that's probably a classic, you know, being able to, you know, use their highlighters. And again, there's a visual component to that. And there's a lot of research behind why students do that, because it's actually found that the brain is very sort of sensitive to color and will be able to sort of, you know, retrieve information that has been highlighted in a particular color. And some colors are found to be quite, you know, potent in terms of their ability to make things stand out. So again, encourage that, you know, buy them their highlighters, buy them their sort of their coloring pencils, encourage them to sort of underline things, encourage them to color code their notes. So it's something they're investing time into it, and they understand that it will probably promote, you know, their ability to recollect the information that they've color coded. The eighth one is mind mapping. And again, this is a very popular one as well. And it's a great, for those who are visual learners, this is a great way of being able to, in a sort of infographic type way, present information. And again, sometimes, and they're encouraged to do that in exams, where they're actually given a section to do rough work. And, you know, the examiner actually will take notice of the fact that they've maybe trying to mind map as a way of retrieving information. So mind mapping is basically where they sort of maybe put a central topic or concept in the middle of a page, and they do little offshoots from it, and they try and remember key terms, key important information around that particular topic. And it's a great way of planning an essay. It's a great way of giving structure to an essay. And again, we would have a lot of sort of blank templates. You know, a lot of students create their own, but we would have a lot of blank templates, you know, in the guidance office for any student that wants to, you know, or you think may benefit from using this method. It's fine to be really, really useful for, as I mentioned earlier, visual learners, but also those learners that find it, you know, important to write things out. And some people actually like writing things out, you know, over and over again, and that's fine. That's just their process in terms of learning, but it's probably more efficient in terms as opposed to just writing it out from the textbook. The ninth point I just want to make this evening is about the importance of exercise. It's fine that, you know, if a young person actually exercises, not only does exercise fight fatigue, it doesn't cause fatigue, it can also increase the energy levels. and it puts them in a better space, you know, maybe to go about, you know, doing some study. So encourage them to exercise, whatever it may be, whether it's going for a walk, getting out into the fresh air, and it sort of can sort of stave off that lethargy that can sometimes come when they study, because often teenagers will become quite exhausted when they go up to study and they're maybe overwhelmed by the task. If they actually go out for a brisk walk, they revitalize themselves and give them that little energy burst that they might need to tackle a particular topic. So it's really important that they maintain an exercise routine as well as a study routine. Studying before bed, it's crucial for brain function. Obviously, sleep is really important, and it's really important that you encourage good sleep routines and making sure that they're going to bed early. And they talk about now, you know, good sleep hygiene in terms of having, you know, a sleep routine, making sure that there's a digital detox maybe done half an hour before they go to bed, that maybe all, you know, devices are turned off, that they actually maybe do a little bit of light reading. And that they get themselves into the habit of going to bed at a particular time. And it's actually found that anything that they read quite recent before bed can actually be processed by the brain whilst they're sleeping. So sometimes they might say, "Oh, I just want to read a chapter from my novel." That's fine. That's actually not going to stimulate the brain. That's probably just going to help the brain settle, and it's probably a good time for reading as well. So it's important that when they sleep, you know, athletes will talk about the importance of sleep as well. It's a really important way to help the brain organize your memories. So it's really important that they're getting enough sleep. All too often we hear of, you know, young people coming in and saying, "I'm not going to bed until 12 o'clock, you know, even 1 o'clock. And that's too late, okay? They need to make sure that they're getting a huge amount of sleep so they're able to, you know, do all of this, you know, that they're able to participate fully in school, do their exercise and study effectively. So sometimes as a parent or guardian, you know, there's a really strong desire to support them and do as much as you possibly can. And there's lots of things that you can do. And we're having in it together sort of attitude, you know, not, you know, giving out to them, "Oh, you need to study, you need to study." Just say, like, what can I do? You know, is there anything I can do to help? Creating an environment, you know, that's study friendly for them, and understanding that, you know, distractions and other siblings, sometimes you want them in front of you, you know, to see that they're actually studying when they're up in the bedroom, don't know what they're doing. But allowing them, you know, a study friendly environment away from distractions and sort of the hustle and bustle of the hub of the home. Mobile phones, making sure that should be left in another room. And I often say to them, you know, their mobile phone is sometimes an extension of, you know, their hand. You know, they would find it very difficult, you know, to be without their mobile phone. I'm going to touch on this later on about screen time, and sort of the difficulty parents and teachers have with screen time and the evolution around screen time, because it's such a huge part now of their education, having the availability of their phone. So having sort of a positive attitude towards it, but also using it as an incentive. So I would say to them, look, if you don't need your mobile phone when you're maybe doing a 30-minute study session, you know, we always have to try and incentivize yourselves to do something. I would say to them, put your mobile phone in another room, and your reward after a 30-minute study session is that you can check your mobile phone. And you have to incentivize yourself. And that could be a means by which you would incentivize yourself. So ensure there's space, you know, on their desk to study, and they've all the necessary equipment. Sometimes, you know, we'll see students and they'll go to sit down to study, and they'll go and they look for notes, they look for a pencil, look for a pen, making sure that they're organized and they have all of their equipment, and making sure that they have a healthy diet, that they're drinking enough water, that they make sure they're eating 3 regular meals. That's really important as well. Encouraging exercise, as I mentioned, and a good sleeping pattern is all important and goes towards good study habits. A child that's tired or a child that's not sort of eating enough will find it very difficult to concentrate and to effectively study. A very common question that's asked as well is, how long should a student study for? And I've just taken this from a piece of research that was completed. It's felt that, you know, every student is different, but below is a rough guide. So your study time should most of all suit your academic needs and goals, but as a rough guide, first year, maybe 1.5 hours per day, second year, 2 hours per day, third year, 2.5 to 3, Fifth year, maybe 3 to 4 hours. And sixth year, they're actually studying perhaps at an optimal amount of time, which would be 3.5 to 5 hours per day. But they're working towards a goal. This is, their exam results gives them a currency by which they can go on to the next stage in their lives. So it's really important that they understand that it's for their benefit, that this is something they're making an investment in their future. And it's not something, they're not reliant upon you to encourage them to study, that actually motivation is intrinsic, that it's coming from themselves. Screen time, I suppose this is a really difficult one because, as parents, we're wrestling the phone out of their hands, saying you're not getting that phone when you're studying. But unfortunately, devices and computers are actually a part of the learning process now. And there is a really good video that is attached onto this. It's from Dr. John Barry, and it's advice for parents about boundaries around screen time. And it's considered now, it's not really about, screen time and whether they should be sort of, allowed on their screens a certain amount of time. It's making sure that they're not passive when they're on their screens. That they're not just sort of scrolling sort of mindlessly through social media, that they're actively learning and engaging with material that maybe their teachers posted on Google Classroom. So again, there's a trust and there's a confidence that they're using their phone in a way that is beneficial to them. So again, encouraging that, saying, look, I understand you need to use your phone, but make sure that you're using it to support your learning, that you're actually not getting caught up on being passive online. I'm just going to touch on this. It's just the importance of attendance. Most students would have really excellent attendance, and I think we all understand the importance of attendance. Just be mindful that, getting into a habit of poor attendance has huge implications in terms of exam performance. And it's really important that, again, in second year, they've finished their first year, making sure that you're encouraging really, really strong attendance, because there is a direct correlation between attendance and exam performance. So making sure that they're not using, coming up to an exam, for example, they might you might notice them saying, oh, I don't feel well, just being cognizant of that, but they might start, using sickness as a means to maybe avoidance, try and just, as a parent, be aware of that. Okay. Student support. Signs that may indicate your child requires extra support, and this does happen. You might notice that your child is particularly irritable. They might have sleep or diet disturbances. They're withdrawn, from activities that they would have previously enjoyed. They're constantly complaining about not feeling well. There's a really good website called Your Mental Health. It's the HSE website. And it's about encouraging positive mental health and things that they can do to sort of promote their own mental health and making sure that they stay well and they know themselves how to stay well. So, encourage them if they want, they can, go on to that. But if you feel that they perhaps need a little bit of extra support and that they're not managing, on their own, they're not getting a good routine established, seek advice, from anyone within the student support team within the school. That could be a tutor, your head, myself or Mr. Garrity, the chaplain, or any member of the student management or the senior management team. That's absolutely fine. We're more than happy, signpost them to the right area. Okay. Some useful resources. I've just included a few things that you might want to sort of, if you get time, access, just in terms of web-wise, staying safe online, just a little bit more about the whole notion of learning to learn, and the importance of the junior cycle and the experience of second year students and how important it is for second year students to start, the journey of positive study. I just want to say thank you for listening. That was quite heavy for a Monday evening, but again, this presentation is available. If anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, or if you would prefer, you can email me directly. That's no problem. And if you feel that your child needs a little bit of extra support around study, they can get in contact with me. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Hello, Ms. McSorley. Can I just check there? Can you hear me now?
I can, Mr. Bishop, yeah.
Thank you very much. Apologies. First and foremost, thank you very much for a very informative and engaging presentation, and apologies for the beginning of the meeting where I suppose parents were really struggling to hear me. If you ask your son or daughter, maybe perhaps in school, that they wouldn't have that problem. Maybe perhaps we're in a shout at break time or lunchtime. So apologies for the glitch with modern technology. Just to finish off the meeting, I suppose, and it's just to highlight something for our second-year parents. I'll just show it to you now in the PowerPoint in 2 seconds. Just to I don't want to delay it any longer. It's in relation to the virtual parent-teacher meeting that will be taking place later on in December. As you're probably well aware of, your son or daughter's exams begin next week. They will be in-class exams. And I suppose, sorry, excuse me, just yeah. Bear with me 1 second. They're in-class exams, and I suppose just to highlight, the second-year parent-teacher meeting will be happening on December the 9th. This year we've moved to the virtual one. We've had our 3rd and 6th year parent-teacher meetings, and I suppose feedback from parents have been very positive. I suppose it's different for everybody. It's certainly different for parents and students sitting behind the camera speaking to their class teacher. However, as I say, the feedback has been quite positive. Just on your screen at the moment, we're running the parent-teacher meeting through a piece of software called PTM Organizer. Now, parents will be sent these details along with a link to a PowerPoint explaining the process in the coming days. And I suppose in my top left-hand corner, when you click into the PTM Organizer, you will be met by this parent guardian login page. Now, the school roll number will be sent out to you, and also a unique student ID. So your own son or daughter will be sent the unique student ID. You use both of those numbers to log in. Once you log in, you'll be met with the diagram here in the top right-hand corner. It will have the list of teachers that your son or daughter has currently in class, and you select your preferences on the right-hand side. Now, in some cases, you know, your son or daughter might be doing very well in a particular class and you feel it not necessary, maybe perhaps to speak to that teacher. No problem, you put down a 0 beside that. You prioritize, I suppose, the teachers that you do want to speak to. That begins with 1 as priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And as I say, you don't have to select every teacher, but feel free to do so if you want to get speaking to those teachers. Now, the meetings will last 5 minutes. It is quite tight, I suppose, in order to fit in all of the students in the year group and the number of teachers that we've got. The slots are 5 minutes, and parents are asked to stick to that 5 minutes, as well as teachers to stick to that 5-minute schedule. So when you select your preferences, what I would ask then, down the bottom right-hand corner, you will hit the button, I will attend the meeting, and please save my preferences. The portal will close, and so you'll be notified on the Come Here app that the portal will close. A couple of days later, you'll be notified again on the Come Here app that the portal is now reopened. When it reopens, you can see down in the bottom left-hand corner where you have a demonstration school, parent-teacher meeting on the 15th of October, the name of the particular student, and what you will have is a rota. Okay, so that rota will basically tell you, I'm going to be seeing Miss Phillips there, for example, for history at 16:05. Now, that's my appointment schedule. Now, you may ask, where are these appointments? Your son or daughter will be sent on the day of the meeting an email to their school account, and in that email, it will contain all of the links to the required parent-teacher meetings. You click in and out of the links, I suppose, going by the rota, okay, which you will have. My advice would be, to print off that rota or to write it down so you have it easy to hand. So when you are clicking through the links, you can clearly see what teacher you have and what time that you have them at. It is, as I've said before, a new way of doing things, and I suppose we've been directed by the Department of Education, you know, that we had to move to online virtual parent-teacher meetings, and unfortunately don't have the in-person one. Someday perhaps we will get back to that, but currently this is the way that our parent-teacher meetings will be taking place. I suppose Miss McSorley did mention, I suppose, an element of trust when it comes around the area of study, and as I say, this new way of doing our parent-teacher meeting requires an element of trust from our students, that they're going to be there to help and guide you to click through the meetings, and I suppose letting you log into their Zoom account and I suppose being there present to listen to what their teachers have to say. All of these details, and Ms. McSorley did mention it, the links to this particular PowerPoint, the link to the PowerPoint explaining the virtual parent-teacher meeting will be sent to second-year parents in the coming days. And as I said, Apologies for the sound interference or the issue with the sound earlier on in this information evening. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat, and I'll keep the meeting open for another 2 or 3 minutes. Feel free to put it into the chat. And as I say, apologies again for the sound, the technical issues around the sound at the beginning of the meeting. Thank you very much. I can't see any questions coming through, Miss McSorley. Oh, sorry, I just see one there, is it? I think maybe perhaps, will the schedule for the parent-teacher meetings? Yeah, so the schedule just for the parent-teacher meetings, it will be sent in advance. You will receive the schedule 2 days before the parent-teacher meeting takes place, and you will be sent the links for the parent-teacher meeting on the day of the meeting. The reason the links are sent on the day of the meeting is simply because to stop people from clicking into the meeting, teachers will be getting notifications in their email that such and such a person has tried to join the meeting maybe the day previous. So the schedule will be available to you 2 days before the parent-teacher meeting, and the links will be sent out the day of the meeting. Okay, folks, good stuff. I can't really see any other questions coming in. And I suppose I appreciate the nice messages, certainly directed towards Miss McSorley. Is a very informative and engaging presentation. So I'll end it at that, folks. Thank you very much for your time. And I really appreciate your attendance. Thank you. Bye-bye.